Hello everyone. Today I'm going to try and record a video about asexuality and my experience with it. And to help me, I have brought my mama, who will help ask questions for me to answer, so I have a little bit more idea what to talk about.
Hello, everybody. I feel like every time you call me mama, they might think that I'm like your designer,
Now,
your
I'm
character
my own
designer.
designer. I sprang forth from the ether.
You are your own mama.
Yeah, very complicated. Don't worry about it. No,
This is why you lay eggs.
no. The other person is Wolf, who is my mama, as in my partner. Don't worry about it.
One of your partners.
Yeah,
I think you have two others. I
yeah.
actually don't really know.
I have two others.
Uh, you live with two others. I'm the long distance one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, asexuality. So, what does it mean to you?
So for me, asexuality is basically I extremely just don't want to have sex. Like I'm not interested in having sex. I don't feel any desire to have it. Uh, Part of that is so my asexuality isn't entirely that I'm just not interested. It's that I tried sex and realized that it was not for me. And part of that is some sensory issues that I think are tied to stuff going on in my brain. Um,
Mhm.
but at the same time, there's like bodily insecurities and just realizing that no, this isn't really the sort of physical intimacy that I want to have with others.
So I think uh, to maybe flesh a bit of this out is that you don't have like a formal diagnosis for autism, but I think it's safe to say that you are autistic. You are on the spectrum, and you're also transgender, a trans woman. And I know ever since I met you, I've known you for like over a decade now, and you've always expressed how upsetting your genitals are and how much that plays a part in your asexuality or your adverseness to sex. Uh,
Yeah, I
and even in like the past, you've when I met you, you were still trying to be sexual and have sexual experiences, usually online. Uh, it's partly how we met. You were even a cam girl for a while,
yeah,
which I know you have experiences with that. That's not how I personally met you.
correct.
I knew you like well before then,
Yeah, my
but we
time.
were not together until like after a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, the like my insecurities about my body. A lot of it is centered around just kind of not having the kind of body that I would like to have. There's a lot of things I would change about my body given the chance, and my genitals are one of those things. But I think even if I had the genitals I want, there would still be a degree of purity and just discomfort with having my body touched. And it's hard to put into words why it is, but it's just like I sort of cringe at certain kinds of physical contact.
I think that's something that's maybe changed a bit because I recall you, this is like years ago, saying that a big part of your asexuality was not having uh, GRS, gender reaffirming surgery. Would you say that's true?
I would say that was for a long time. I think it was also that was one of the things that I knew I didn't like about my body and just wasn't interested in having sexual experiences with
Yeah.
that part
So
of
I
my
guess
body
is
the way it was.
yeah, I guess it, that's to say like a lot of your asexuality has evolved in varying ways due to becoming more comfortable with yourself. I think for a while you were adverse to adopting the label,
Yeah.
but when you did, you were just so much more happy and more comfortable with yourself.
Yeah. I was really scared referring to myself as asexual because there are like still kinds of sexual attraction that I do feel. Like I will look at some bodies and I will look at like some porn and I will like it, but that's because there's a distance. Because I'm not part of it. It is over there, away from me, and I can handle that. But
And
and I worried for a long time that being able to handle that made me not asexual enough.
as you found, like that's actually a common asexual experience, and it even has its own name, like gray ace. If
Yeah,
I'm correct.
there's a more specific term that eludes me right now because I haven't used it in a long time. I've started just referring to myself as asexual or gray ace. Gray ace is just sort of you are on the asexual spectrum, but it's not necessarily like the most extreme end of that spectrum that most people understand as being asexual.
Yeah. I think the other thing is like, even if you're asexual, that's just. Well, I think you experience some form of sexual attraction, um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like every ace person doesn't have sex or doesn't enjoy sex.
Yeah,
It's just that sexual attraction isn't uh, as big or any part of that.
yeah. There's there's a lot of like different complicated sort of relationships with sexual attraction. Uh, One term I learned recently from a video was something called sexual, which is sort of that when you get to know someone better, you become less sexually attracted to them. And sexual basically meaning stranger sexual.
That's
And
actually pretty interesting. I never heard of that sort of phenomenon.
I wouldn't say that's what I experienced because I don't want to have sex with anyone, even stranger. But I can kind of relate to it in terms of, as I mentioned, the distance. My how comfortable I am with sexual stuff is how far away from me it is, and I would imagine for some sexual people that there's an emotional distance with strangers that makes it easier for them to be more comfortable with sexual stuff. Whereas if someone's really close and intimate with them and they know them really well, I imagine it might just feel too close to home.
When you phrase it like that and you frame it like that, I feel like I can actually understand it a little more. I didn't think about it in that way, but I could see how that could actually be a bit of a thing.
Yeah.
especially, and this is just me making assumptions. I wouldn't say this is like for everybody, but I could see it as like you find sex to be like an embarrassing sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like if you find it a very embarrassing sort of thing, I could see how doing this with somebody who you will only ever meet once would be a lot easier than somebody that you know very well.
Yeah. Uh, that doesn't quite describe my experience, but it's an experience that when I see it articulated, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I get that. That makes sense to me."
I'm sure like it's a very wide spectrum and it manifests in all different ways. That's just one way that to me like it is more tangible in my understanding.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm trying to remember like back when you sort of came out to me. I guess like when I met you, you were it was all online and in all the years I've known you, I've only known you online. Uh, we've been together for like 7 years formally,
I think
maybe a little
so.
longer,
I think 7. I
7 or 8 ish, something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, so we've been together for a good ass long time, and I've actually come to the realization that knowing somebody and being romantically involved with somebody for that long is actually kind of uh, uncommon, at least when I've talked to other people. And we're also like both in our early 30s,
Yeah.
and I think that can help make our experiences more relatable to like people who are maybe a little older. Uh, but I guess I
Yeah.
wanted to sort of like say like when I originally met you, the thing that like I really fell in love with was that you just made me feel really comfortable about myself. You were like one of the first people that I knew who really affirmed who I was, even before I really knew who was fully. Um, Not just in trans, I at least identified as some form of genderqueer or non-binary since I was a fucking kid.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was interactions with you that just made me feel really safe and happy, and it was never any of the sexual experiences which you did allow me to have back then. Uh, but it was like the emotional part of it that really made me happy, uh, and in some ways like turned on. Uh, I guess the point of me saying this stuff is like when you told me that you were asexual, it was like, oh, that actually makes sense. And it was really easy to make that switch because even though I enjoyed uh, the experiences that we had sexually, uh, and you really were enthusiastic about them, I could also tell that you really struggled a lot with it, and as did I with you. Uh, and I remember you telling me like how nice it was that I did just accept you.
Yeah.
in that way. You were just like really, really happy. And you seemed a lot more at peace. And overall, you seem just so much more at peace with yourself and even your body to an extent. You used to be very, very violently, I would say, hateful towards your body
Yeah.
for a long time. But that sort of shifted when you came out as Ace.
I feel a lot less like the stuff that I don't like about my body and that I want to change about my body remains, but the fact that I don't feel any sort of obligation to put that body into a sexual context makes it a lot easier to not be as upset about my body being the way it is. I
Yeah,
was
I think that's like the thing that I was trying to dig at is that you can continue.
uh so when you accepted me being Ace, it was such a relief because I'd always worried as soon as I started to like start grappling with the whole Ace thing that it would somehow make me like less of a good partner to the people that I love, that like suddenly there's this one thing that I just can't provide anymore. And I worried that that would make me letting people down or frustrating them. But when I came out to my partners and came out to you, like you were just very understanding and super supportive and really helped me be a lot more comfortable using the term for myself, which is something you've always been good at, is making me feel more confident in who I am and how I identify.
I'm trying to think of. I had something I wanted to say. I'm trying to think what that was. Oh right, like sex is like something that is so prolific, and it's made out to be this super important big thing, this huge experience, and there's just a lot of baggage attached to it, both uh, in society, but also just with your body and any relationship that you have. That's always going to be a thing that hangs there in a way. I think even if you are in a very comfortable asexual relationship with somebody, or a relationship with somebody where you're ace and they're accepting of that, um, I feel like because it's so prolific, the idea that sex is a thing that everybody does, and if you don't have it, you're weird or not normal, or if you don't enjoy it, like it's because you haven't had good experiences or whatever. Uh, I feel like that just does. I mean, I don't feel like it does do a tremendous amount of harm to a lot of people, and it makes it really difficult to uh, be understood
Yeah.
and be related to because you're just treated in this alienated way.
It also
Do
sort
you?
of
Are you gone?
it it's part of why I haven't like identified as ace anywhere my family would see it. Because I do keep in touch with my family, but I feel like it would even if they didn't voice those questions, it would lead to them wondering so many things about my relationships or about my identity or wondering if such and such thing is the cause of me being ace. And I do worry about them thinking that there might be something wrong with me, something that broke in me that I'm
I I
that
actually didn't know this about you. Sorry.
yeah, I haven't told anyone in my family because I don't know how they'll react and I don't know what they'll think. It's like, oh, is could this be because of this sexual trauma you experienced when you were a child, or oh, does this mean something about my relationships? And or but I thought you said you were bi and you have expressed tons of attraction to bi people, and it's like not bi people, tons of attraction to people, and uh, it's like I don't I don't want to have to explain all that, and I don't want them to wonder all that. And assuming I don't think my family is ever going to ask about my sex life, so in that respect, I find it much easier to just be like, they just know me as the weird by a trans girl in the family, and I'll leave it at that. That can be their understanding of me.
Yeah, I think maybe for a bit of context on this is that you are from the Midwest and come from a largely formally Mormon family, if I understood.
So my immediate family, we all used to be Mormon. We grew up in the Mormon church. Uh, it was expected that I would do all the Mormon things that were expected of Mormon boys because everyone thought I was a boy at the time. And now my family, my immediate family isn't like that anymore. My immediate family is, I think, all Mormon dropouts, essentially. Uh, I think I'm not 100% sure about my stepdad, but at the very least, he he doesn't seem to take any issue with the rest of my immediate family being ex-Mormons. But the extended family on my stepdad's side, they are all still very devout Mormons and all that. I was actually told when I came out as trans that I wasn't allowed near some of my to be around my younger cousins because I would set a bad example. And it was and like my grandma on my stepdad's side uh still doesn't use the right name for me.
Oof.
And when I originally came out as being both like bi and trans, like thought I shouldn't transition, but also like if you're bi, doesn't that mean you can just date girls? You can just be you can just live a heterosexual life, and it's like, but have you considered now?
I just like the idea that you're a trans woman and just date girls and have a heterosexual life. You know, that'll work out. It's fine.
Fine. I I actually had an experience the last time I visited my family, which was years ago, where my grandma used the wrong name for me, and my little brother corrected her. He did not react to his correction, but I appreciated that.
Oh, that's. I remember you telling me this. That's. You're immediately your. Excuse me. Your immediate family sounds pretty solid. I
I
know. I know a couple of the younger ones. Your closer siblings are just really supportive and cool towards you.
They're the best. But I think
Uh,
the reason to get into all this is basically I'm still kind of they are a lot better than they used to be, but at the same time, I don't know what sort of attitudes they still might hold towards certain things like asexuality.
Yeah, and even if they might be better about it and are willing to like meet you in the middle, sometimes it just really fucking sucks to meet in the middle
Yeah.
and to have those conversations of being mildly dismissed and put down, even though they are well meaning. Um,
I also worry about if I came out as asexual in like spaces where my family would see, if my extended family saw, I worry about like the sort of conversations that they might put my immediate family through.
oh yeah,
I don't think they would bring it up, but it's also I don't want my family to, in addition to having to deal with whatever random transphobia from them, to also have to be like, no, Kimmy is not dysfunctional because she is asexual.
I feel like being trans is like the big thing, but I'm always surprised by like what thing some people will really latch on to and be like, this is the thing that breaks the camel's back, so to speak.
Yeah.
So,
A lot
and
of
on one
people,
hand, it's like, how can you be like mildly tolerant of being trans, but it's the ace thing. That's the thing that's gonna just cause a ruckus. But it happens, and I know that stuff happens.
yeah, a lot of people are uh, have very toxic attitudes towards asexuality where they really are just of the opinion that it's just like some small personal decision that I don't know. I like even in the queer community there are people who feel like
Oh yeah,
asexuality doesn't belong
God
or
yeah,
that or who describe asexuals as volcells.
God. You want to elaborate on what a volcel is?
Voluntary celibate. So like
Yeah,
yeah, it and it's just a complete dismissal of what it means to be asexual and what those experiences are like.
and this is a term that you heard from another transgender person as well.
Yeah, I've seen trans people be really shitty about it. I lost a so I'm not sure if everyone will remember this. A few years back, there was a huge Twitter discourse mess about whether straight asexuals belong at Pride, which straight asexual is a nothing term because the straight experience is not the asexual experience. But even assuming that there are asexual people who might refer to themselves as straight asexuals because they are of who they are romantically attracted to, uh, it's still a very queer identity. It is a sexual minority that undergoes a lot of discrimination and does face abuse.
Yeah,
And
and is it okay to add something here?
yeah, go ahead.
Um, I feel like there's a lot of hang up on the idea that LGBTQ is specifically sexual. And like the idea that people are really hung up that what queerness is this very specific thing of sexual experiences and identity. And one thing that really excludes and even like is transphobic and misgenders transgender people who are straight and who also belong in the movement. But I think in the broader context, like we should be accepting that what queerness is much more dynamic and nuanced than just experiences between people of the same gender or what have you. Like what you can define as a queer relationship or a queer experience can fall well outside of what you might uh, understand as what a common person, what a regular person might understand as LGBT, you know.
Yeah, I
And I
agree with
think
that.
that's like a really important thing because people get hung up on shit like asexuality or the idea of like agender people or uh, I know on sort of both sides of the thing that like intersex people are not part of LGBTQ movement, but I think like even if you are a cis straight intersex person, a lot of the issues that intersex people face is also very like there's some intersectionality with transgender people and even uh, gay and lesbian bi people as well,
Yeah. I,
or also like bisexual people in heterosexual relationships, which I would say that the idea of a heterosexual relationship or a relationship between a man and woman where one is like bisexual or queer in some way doesn't always have to. I feel like the label heterosexual comes with its own baggage, but I guess this is like a whole
yeah.
whole other conversation. But I guess what I mean is like so many people are just fucking hung up on definitions and uh, having rigid boxes. So with the idea being that we'll just not be taken seriously, and it's like you're a transgender person saying this. What are you going on about?
Yeah.
And so it's not always transgender people. We're both trans on this, and we've both heard that sort of thing. But yeah,
Yeah. It's not always transgender people, but we bring it up because we've seen trans people in our communities do this stuff, and it's like,
yeah,
I really wish
that's
you
what
knew
we've
better.
seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. But anyway, uh, you can go on.
There was one thing that so my mama showed me a video that talked about some asexual stuff and was actually part of why I wanted to make this video. Uh, and because it brought up kink and uh, did say that there was a acted like there was an inherently sexual element to kink, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I actually disagree with that.
Oh yeah.
So like one of the like biggest examples that immediately came to mind is spanking actually, and I don't really do spanking stuff anymore because just discomfort with certain parts of my body being touched. But even when I was into that, I would not describe the positive feelings I got out of that as being sexual. It was just like it was endorphins basically. Like it was just like a an intense experience. It for someone like me who is asexual and also has like sensory issues. Spanking is actually a very easy thing for my body to understand. That is a very easy sensation to parse. uh, compared to like having erogenous finger quote zones on my body touched. And so it was this intense, easy to parse sensation, followed by endorphins, and then cuddling. And I love cuddling and I love endorphins. So, and I wouldn't say any of these things were sexual for me. And I kind of wanted to bring that up as like what someone gets out of a particular kink might not be sexual. And it really depends on the person what they're getting out of it. And I think there are probably a lot more kink people than you'd think who would be like, oh, yeah, this isn't something I used to get off. Because it was never something to get off for me. Uh, it was just nice. It was a nice thing.
I feel like there's an assumption from the outside looking in, and usually I think it's explained to a lot of uh, people on the outside that it is a sexual thing. But a lot of times when I listen to people talk about, like, in particular, S&M stuff, they always talk about power dynamics and putting in things like trust and affirmation, uh, and being understood in a way that other people will not understand them in, you know, s- sometimes you want to be treated and looked at and understood in a way that you wish you could be by society, but is genuinely unsafe for a lot of reasons. But to do it with someone or a group of people who know you and understand consent and boundaries and all that are willing to give you that experience, and it is more affirming of who you are as a person and allowing you to express yourself in a way that you wouldn't normally be able to, uh, because, like, again, it can be dangerous, uh, or it's like out of the boundaries of what you would get out of normal day-to-day interactions.
Yeah,
And I think that's difficult for a lot of people to understand, to know that sometimes it's just a thing that you need to feel whole.
yeah,
Uh, and it has nothing to do with sex or sexuality. It's just you want to be interacted in a very specific way.
yeah. Uh, while you were talking about that, I actually thought of another good example, which is like bondage stuff where you're restrained and tied up.
Yeah.
So I have a ton of anxiety. I have to take medication to make my anxiety at a level where I can handle it, but I still have anxiety. And if you want to know something that helps a lot with anxiety, it's being put in a position where you don't have like any decisions to make. I like where the expectations are very low. I being tied up, it's like, oh, I don't have to do anything. Uh,
Yeah, I imagine, like, for this is maybe something like some autistic people have interesting relationships with, because, like, I know a lot of people on the spectrum who talk about wanting to not have to worry about things and stuff, and I think people hear that and think it's super selfish, but they also don't know, like, how deep that goes and how complicated it is to be neurodivergent in a society that expects you to not be neurodivergent,
yeah,
and having an outlet, having people to treat you in these ways that are maybe difficult to understand on the outside. It's important, and it is, you know, to me, if you want to frame it as queer, I think that's okay. I think it is part of the queer experience to have that. Even if you are strictly heterosexual, uh,
I think I could agree with that. But I guess like the whole I like I mentioned, I wanted to correct any potential misunderstanding that people might have that, well, one, that kink is inherently sexual, but also that asexual people would necessarily be getting sexual anything from kink. Like,
yeah.
kink can just be a satisfying an emotional need, and I think that's part of what makes kink really cool. As an asexual person, that's one of the things that I love about kink, even though I don't do kink stuff as much as I used to.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, like not all asexual people are adverse
Yeah.
to sex itself and all that, but this is more about your experiences.
Yeah, I'm mostly like I'm not trying to make a categoric
Yeah,
comment on what asexuality is for everyone or everyone's
yeah.
experience as a sexual person with kink, but more
I, ju-
talking
I
about
just
my
wanted to reaffirm that because I feel
yeah,
like that's a misunderstanding that I even had uh, for a while.
yeah. Like I just want people to get to hear some of my perspectives because I feel like some of the stuff that I wanted to share, stuff that people might not hear even necessarily from other asexual people.
I think the other thing is like um, that I wanted to bring up was specifically like our relationship. I'm complicated. I would say uh, describing myself is not the easiest thing in the world, but I'm non-binary. I exclusively use they them. Uh, People who I'm close with, I'm okay with masculine nouns and pronouns. Uh, and I would say I find this term a little weird, but I've come to the realization that maybe it is a useful term and that I should use it more, which is demisexual, the idea that you become more attracted to somebody as you get to know them.
Yeah,
Uh, a lot of people would say that's a very common experience, but I think for me, while I can find somebody like just sexually attractive on their own merit of their body, to me, even with people and like fictional characters and stuff, like if I think their personality is really appealing, that is a huge, huge turn on. Uh, Feeling comfortable and safe with somebody is the thing that just puts me way over. Um, but it seems like that's maybe not entirely as common of experience as it's made out to be. Uh, but I would say I like sex and sexual experiences and like being in a really romantic relationship with you, and I consider you a lover. I consider you a very close. I mean, you are the closest person in my life and have been for years and years and years. And I've never had like problems with or conflicts with your asexuality. Like in a sense, a part of me wouldn't mind if you wanted those experiences
Yeah.
because I would be able to share other parts of myself with you, and I'd be able to explore parts of myself with you, something that we could do mutually together. But I feel like I have a fulfilling relationship with you like this. Uh, Although the main reason why we've never actually met each other in person is because we're both fucking poor. We're also both like have various mental illnesses and stuff where like living together would be not the best idea.
There's
Um,
also just an element I think where even if the opportunity arises, I I I feel like we've been waiting for like the right time in other ways as well to meet up.
yeah, it's hard to align things like physical health and mental health and financial health
Yeah,
to like it's the sun and the moon all aligning to make it happen and
we have so Kanabata is about these two lovers who can only meet once a year, and it's like that. But if the two lovers had to uh, decide that one time that they meet based on mental, physical, and financial health, and all of those things not necessarily lining up.
yeah but I wanted to bring a lot of that up because like uh you can have a healthy relationship with somebody who isn't also asexual and like be loved fully and have a fulfilling relationship. Even it's not always ideal, but few relationships are. Our hangups are not because of your asexuality; they are trauma. They are capitalist related.
Yeah, it turns out that living in a uh, bigoted capitalist society and having a lot of emotional trauma causes problems sometimes.
Yeah,
But I think it is kind of comforting to know that that's where our occasional problems are, and not uh, because I don't want to have sex.
yeah. Like that's just uh, not a thing, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I think another thing is that this may be a little complicated, but and I'm sure there's probably a word for it because there's a word for everything in the queer community. And that is like you're poly. You have your two partners that you live with physically,
Yeah,
but I wouldn't say I am per se. I'm okay being in a largely monogamous relationship. Though that said, I do want a physical relationship.
yeah.
So I don't really know what that fully makes me, though I've had some very upsetting and hurtful conversations with some people who were poly and told me that I should get over my shit and accept that I am. But I
Well,
would say that like my experience is just more complicated
yeah.
or and nuanced than just this binary between being poly and not being poly. And I don't really know your other partners very well, kind of because I've come to the conclusion that I kind of like having that distance. Um, I feel like it just helps me uh, in various ways that I haven't fully been able to really articulate and wrap my head around. So maybe it'll change on that, but that's sort of where I'm sitting. Um, but yeah, like I would say I'm largely monogamous, and I do want a physical relationship and in a sexual one at that.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, you still are able to have. We're still able to have a successful relationship.
Yeah. I think like we're actually we have a really good relationship, all things considered.
All things considered.
Well, like we have our struggles, but
Oh yeah.
when you hear about some of the other relationships that people stay in, like oh, we're probably fine. We have our struggles, but at least we're not like some of these other relationships.
uh, there's something I want to say. One other thing. Uh, oh yeah, I recall somebody saying like, "Oh, it sounds like you're more like two best friends," and it's like, okay, I don't I don't frame it like that. And I do get that this sort of conversation that I'll have to have with somebody where it's like I do have another partner, but they're exclusively long distance. Um, like that's just not anything that will change ever between us, and I'm okay with that. Even though occasionally it is frustrating, it's largely just because it's difficult to you want that physical relationship and or I want that physical relationship, but like it's and sometimes it gets to me, but that isn't a consequence of us because I know for a fact that we would just not survive for very long. Um, and I think that's cool, and I've come to really appreciate our dynamic and how we are.
Yeah. Yeah, that basically even if you are uh someone like me who would like to activate no clip and escape every sexual situation, uh you can still have like some pretty awesome relationships. Some pretty awesome relationships that are really satisfying and positive.
Yeah, and I imagine there are probably a lot of compromises that people have maybe never thought of. I'm a person who, if I ended up with like another ace person who is also like sex averse largely, like the main thing that I know I really need from a relationship is just cuddling. I really like cuddling.
Cuddling,
Um, it does. And like you can do things like cuddle and masturbate or be allowed to masturbate on your own time if that's a thing that you need or I would need. Uh, and like how you have a relationship where the other party just doesn't want to have sex. Uh, there are probably a lot of things uh, that you can do to have a healthy relationship and one where my own sexual desires are met. Uh, I think that might be somewhat difficult, but cross that bridge when you get to it. But I guess I wanted to say that just as like tell people who might run into an ace person, fall in love with an ace person, or are ace themselves, you know, how you can handle and have a healthy relationship means all different kinds of things. And
There's lots of stuff that you can figure out and negotiate to make things work, and it and that sort of thing doesn't necessarily mean like an ace partner having to begrudgingly be like, I guess we'll have sex sometimes, even though I don't want
yeah,
to.
I don't think that you should ever do that.
Oh, I.
I would never advocate for something like that.
Yeah.
Just to make it clear, like I'm not saying that you should compromise quite in that way, but
Oh, yeah, of course.
there's probably a way to meet in the middle on these things where you're both comfortable and both happy and satisfied.
Yeah. And
Uh, or all parties, if that's how it all ends up, right?
yeah. And even if it turns out that you and a an ace partner don't work out, I mean, that's just how relationships are. Sometimes
Mhm.
relationships just don't work out and you aren't compatible, but it isn't necessarily because the partner is ace or because your other partner is not ace, but you are. I think I think that's kind of everything I wanted to talk about. Is there anything else that you wanted to get to before we wrapped up?
Uh, I don't think so. Uh, I'd say like I guess one thing I would want to say is uh, how would I frame this? How should I say this? Sex is something that can be a lot of things that can even just be cuddling or kissing. If you both agree that that's what it is, that is also great. And I say this because they, there's a lot of people who are just literally unable to physically or otherwise to have anything other than that as sex, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can also reframe what sex is in ways that meet the your needs and the needs of the other party or parties. Uh, and it's something that I don't really know very well, honestly, but is something that I've been teaching myself about more, particularly like people who are disabled who uh, how they have sexual experiences and such. So there's a lot of people in society who just get forgotten about in that aspect, and maybe you can still be ace, but also uh, what you define as sex is just so different, or that you don't identify as ace, but you've been questioning because you're maybe you feel like you're not allowed that experience, that sexual experience or expression, if that makes sense.
I
Maybe
think
you
so.
can rephrase it in a way that's easier.
Uh, I mean, basically, sex is something that, like, especially because of like queerness, the definition of what sex is becoming broader, and I think that's something we should embrace. And so, even if you are someone who wants a sexual experience, what that sexual experience should be is something that you can really open your mind to and say, "Oh, hey, this could be a sexual experience for me." Even though it doesn't necessarily fall under the banner of what people would normally consider sex.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's important just because like not doing that really does exclude so many people,
Yeah,
more than you might ever imagine. Uh, and I don't necessarily mean to frame that fully in a queer experience. That's something that's more personal if you want to frame it as queer.
yeah,
But yeah, so for anybody listening, it's a thing to consider, and uh, one that I think is important to hear in a more broad way than just sex can be anything you make it out to be, uh, which is true, but I want
yeah,
it to be a little more specific.
yeah.
Anyway, I think that's everything.
I think so. Anyone who listens to this, I hope it was helpful for you. I've been wanting to make this video for a little while now, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you for watching and listening, and if you like it, maybe subscribe or share this with other people.
Yeah, and hey, if you have questions, feel free to leave them, and if it's for me or for Kimmy,
Yeah, you can
uh,
you can post questions in the comments, or you can tweet questions at me on Twitter.
you're at Little Bratty Button on
Yeah,
Twitter, and by Little, it's
yeah,
LILBRATTY Bratty Button.
yeah.
And I'm Howling Galaxy as one word.
Yep. So again, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you later.